Welcome, welcome, welcome to the UpKeep Pledge Pros Podcast, a podcast dedicated to unmatched value and unwavering support for our customers and the community at large. Today, we have UpKeep customer Chris Smith, who is the maintenance manager at American Tank. He is also a naval veteran serving on an aircraft carrier, just like me. So we already have that in common, which is wonderful. Chris has been with UpKeep. He's a relatively new customer. And they're doing a lot of great things. And I just want to welcome you, Chris, to the Pledge Pros podcast.
Thank you, Bryan. I appreciate it. It's great to be here today.
You are very welcome. UpKeep is ecstatic to have you. We love speaking to our customers. I specifically like speaking to people who are in heavy industry because that's where I come from. You're a kindred spirit. You know what it's like to live on a ship, which is another great thing. So before we get into, I have some questions for you before we get into all of those things. Give us a little bit of who Chris is and ultimately what you're doing over at American Tank or ATF.
Well, Bryan, like you said, I'm a naval veteran. I started my journey in maintenance probably about 30 years ago. Started out as an O&M apprentice at a paper mill in Austell, Georgia. So
Nice.
basically, I was the gopher, the get dirty guy, the young buck at the time. From there, like I said, I went to the United States Navy. Once I got out of the Navy, I moved here to Cleveland, Ohio, with my wife. Started working in the steel industry, in the maintenance department there. Actually, I was a ladleman, so I did ladle maintenance, 90,000 ton ladles underneath steel.
So awesome.
From, yeah, so from there, I tried a couple other avenues, but one of the best things that happened to me, other than my naval career, was while I was at the steel mill, they were doing an implementation, moving from an CMMS system, a legacy system, into a new EAM, Oracle EAM, as a matter of fact. And that's where I got my start into the business side of the maintenance world. And I haven't turned around since. Everybody jokes around with me. I went from turning wrenches to the other side of the wrench and the nerdy side of maintenance, as they call it. And I've stayed there ever since. Been doing this, like I said, for 30 years. I love what I do. I love being in the maintenance field. I think it's the coolest job you could ever have. There's no better feeling than, seeing something go from broken and causing a problem to back online and fixed. It's a great, great, rewarding career, and I've loved every second of it.
Yeah. So the steel mill industry is a huge interest of mine. My very first role as an equipment maintenance engineer, an equipment maintenance manager, and a director of maintenance and reliability all started at Bethlehem Steel.
Okay.
The facility there, I wasn't working for Bethlehem Steel, but the facility was Sparrows Point, where Bethlehem Steel was. And I got the opportunity before they were all demoed to go crawling around through all the buildings. And boy, was it amazing. I collect antique tools as well. So anything out of steel mills, paper mills, I'm all about that stuff. So that is awesome. Ladle maintenance is wild as hell. Um, and I mean, that's just great. I love to hear that. So at American Tank, though, you are
I am the
leading
maintenance manager. Yeah.
maintenance manager there. So tell me a little bit about American Tank.
So American Tank is a family-owned business here, right here in Cleveland, Ohio, right in the heart of it. And we are a primary supplier, believe it or not, up here in the North Coast for the United States Navy. We have other customers as well, but that is our biggest customer. We support the CVN programs, the build outs, and the submarine programs as well. So we do a lot of fabrication work, a lot of welding. We put a lot of these pieces together and get them back down to the Navy so that we can keep our American country strong.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So I know that living on a carrier for a number of years, just like yourself, um, are you building out the compartments shells?
No, but and I can only go into so much, but what we do for the carriers is we create I-beams.
Oh, okay.
So all the I-beams you see throughout there, that's what we do for the carriers.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Yeah, yeah. Just so everybody knows, aircraft carriers are like 93,000 tons. They are housing up to 6,000 people at a time. There are multiple football fields in length. I ran the flight deck of one for several hours a day, troubleshooting machines, and it's a wild place to live and work, as you know,
Hmm.
Chris.
Yeah, it's nonstop.
It's nonstop. Yeah. Um, so we kind of talked about my first question was like, how'd you get into maintenance, right? So we kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
I find I've led many maintenance managers And one of the prerequisites always for me hiring a maintenance manager is you had to have done the work at some point.
Mhm.
No discredit to people who get out of college and they travel the other path. No discredit to that. But for me, in the environments that we worked and the size of the teams and the complexity of the equipment and dynamics, I wanted to make sure that any maintenance manager that worked for me was a technician at some point, whether he was a welder, electrician, a mechanic, whatever, right? That's just been so valuable for me as a leader. And I know it's proven to be very valuable for others as well. So that's great. How long have you been at American Tank?
I've been at American Tank since, well, about a year now. Prior to that, I worked at a company called PCC Airfoils as a maintenance manager. I was actually director of maintenance facilities there. Prior to that, I worked for the local transit authority, so RTA, or the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, where I ran maintenance for the rail cars
Nice.
here. And then prior to that, again, I did a little consulting work for Johnson Controls for a key bank account, bringing their Maximo system back online and optimizing it. And then, as I mentioned, prior to that was the steel mill.
Right.
So I've moved around quite a bit to different industries, and I love it. But I've always had a heart into the manufacturing side. I like the fast pace, the high speed, low drag environment of it. And it's nice to see, how you can get the equipment humming along and showing that, the work you do increases that revenue that they need, keeps that reliability up. So I've always had a fondness for manufacturing.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. I love all of it. Heavy industry, anything that you can get my attention super easy just by tinkering and tearing things apart and
Oh, yeah.
getting after it. So I guess since we covered your maintenance history in a sense, I mean, my next question is really just going to be, what types of you mentioned a few, but what types of maintenance software systems did you use before utilizing Upkeep?
Prior to Upkeep, I've used multiple different kinds and kind of tinkered in all of them. I always say there's not a CMMS system out there I can't break and figure out. But prior to that, let's see, I've worked a little bit with Fix. I've worked with DataStream 7i, which is an N4 product.
Hmm.
Worked on a few different ERP systems. There's JD Edwards, the Oracle EAM. Both of those are Oracle products. Um, Mainimizer was one we utilized, PCC airfoils. We used Ultramain, which is surprisingly enough was designed for the airline industry, but we used that to track the maintenance for the rail cars at
Hmm.
RTA, which worked out perfectly.
Cool. Uh, Oracle products. I'm very familiar with NetSuite, Oracle NetSuite as an
Mm-hmm.
EAM. I've had a lot of experience with that as far as integrating with Upkeep and pushing, cost association with assets and your inventory and all that stuff. So that's cool. That's awesome. Um, so lots of systems, and you mentioned Maximo there. Were you a super user? Were you helping? What kind? Because Maximo is very pretty complicated. There's a lot going on there. So I'm just kind of curious.
So what I did for Johnson Controls at the time with their Maximo is they were increasing their footprint. So they handled the account for facilities management for the key bank here. So it's housed here in Cleveland, but they had sites throughout the country. We utilizing mobile technicians. So one of the things we started doing there when they brought me on board was one to increase the optimization of the Maximo system to ensure that we capture real-time work that was happening. The other aspect was integrating a GPS system into it so that we knew exactly where the technicians were, who could respond the fastest, which would decrease our time to respond. So I did a lot of that work, which became very interesting real quick because their hub or their center, their IT center for Maximo was in the Philippines. So there's a little bit of a different time zone issue. So I would have to deal with issues at night and go back and forth with them. And then during the day, work with the crews and kind of online, let everybody know this is how we're doing things, this is how we're moving and migrating, and this is how we're optimizing the system.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard lots of things about Maximo. I have good friends that are absolute experts in it, and it's a very expensive platform to run.
Real expensive, and it's pretty there's a lot of loops and turns in it that you got to figure out. It's a lot like using SAP, but
Yeah,
once you figure out the codes in SAP, it hums. And the same thing with Maximo. Once you find the ins and outs, it's an incredible system.
sure, sure. Yeah, where we find our application is the fact that we can be implemented trained and up and running in a tenth of the time
Hmm.
and more than likely half the cost. And then the adoption side of it, as far as from a technician standpoint and the end user standpoint, we move much more efficiently and much faster because of what you said. There are no specific intricacies to the platform, right? It's whatever you want it to be and align with your business model or your local organization, and then we go right from there. Um, which is perfect segue into my next question for you. You as a maintenance manager, I've been a maintenance manager. I know what it's like. Um, how has Upkeep optimized or improved your current role as a maintenance manager for American Tank?
Put it in one simple sentence, Bryan. It put me back in control of maintenance. So when you utilize larger ERP systems, that are set up through an entire enterprise, you end up having multiple sysadmins, or you have folks that are in control of it. So in order for us to make any changes to the system that would improve our efficiency and effectiveness, you end up having a process that you have to go through, which creates an internal lead time for us to make that change.
Sure.
What Upkeep has done is put me in the driver's seat, put my maintenance department and team into the driver's seat to where we can now control the maintenance. So as we go out, implement a certain PM on a new piece of equipment or an old piece of equipment, which is something we deal with frequently. We have a lot of equipment that's well past its life cycle that we're keeping moving. We can adapt and change as the need arises to increase, the uptime of it. We don't
In
have
in
to
real time.
in real time. I can do it on the spot. One of my technicians can, message me inside the Upkeep app and say, I think we need to change this PM. We need to add this line item, or we need to strike this line item, or we need to add this part. And they have the ability to either do that themselves on the spot, real time, right then and there. So there's no lag or loss of information. It's
Sure.
instantaneous. We can keep up with it. So, initially when we brought this on board, that was one of the things that, really got me kind of excited and jazzed up about it, was that, well, I'm back in control of maintenance. When I first started there, our maintenance was simply this. It would pop up on the screen. Well, it wouldn't even pop up on the screen, but it would just say quarterly PM.
What
That's
does that
it.
mean? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
And a lot of my technicians would basically say the same thing. They were frustrated because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. What am I looking for? What am I supposed to be doing? What is our process here? What am I looking for?
How do I know
So
what right is?
right, what do I know what the right steps are to make sure that this equipment is up and running when we need it? So that was a huge, huge point of conditioning for them. They wanted to be involved. They wanted to do the right thing, but didn't have the ability to make the change.
Sure.
Well, now they're in control. They've taken ownership of that equipment, and
Sure.
they actually can see the ownership that they've taken and how it positively affects the overall condition and health of that asset.
Hmm.
So that's a huge buy-in by our folks on the front line. And I only have 4 maintenance technicians. So the fact that we cover such a large area, it's nice for them to be able to take that ownership, make that immediate change, and move on to the next issue. And that's a huge selling point for the technicians, and they loved it.
It's absolutely paramount. The the creation of autonomy
Mm-hmm.
and the creation of them having a say,
Right,
essentially, through work, through their inputs in how their day-to-day life is going to unfold as a maintenance
right,
mechanic, right? Um, there's no better way to go about these systems from a mobile standpoint. I'll just use that as the first example, than to integrate the technician into the decision-making process, into the vetting process, into all those things. Um, you're not, I mean, you probably are at some point, but 90% of the time, you're not out there. You might know the system like the back of your hand, but you're not doing the work, right? So the technician has to have a scalable ability to manage that system and to interact and to do all the right things and know that the things that they're following are also right, that they have an input on.
right. And that's,
Um,
one of the key things too that I liked about it when I was going through it. So the way we started this, just so you know, is that I was looking at different CMMS platforms. I knew that we had to make a change.
sure.
We had to take maintenance back. There's no way around that. It had to happen. So as I was looking at different systems, one of the things I truly liked about it was the fact that, again, in the driver's seat where we belong as a maintenance team for the health of the assets, But one of the things I liked too was that when we go through the checklist, there was this function in Upkeep that was phenomenal, and it was an AI generated task list. Now, normally I would be hesitant to just do that, but as a starting jump off point, it's incredible.
Mhm.
It actually gives them the opportunity, at least there's something they're looking at. And then they can go to the equipment and realize, I don't need this one, and I really should do this on top of this one. And they can start placing it in order. So it gives you a jumping off point,
Mhm.
which reduces your implementation time. A
Mhm.
lot of times as you begin to create your PM strategy or your PM program, it really takes a long time with these larger systems because you can't get in there as fast as you want to. You really have to kind of break it down and step by step, and you kind of have to do a hit and miss or ready, fire, aim type PM, and it doesn't get you anywhere. So the implementation takes longer and longer and longer. It just increases the time frame of the effectiveness of the system. With this one, a quick AI generated task list, they go and they take a look at it and they realize, we need to move these around. I could do it in this order. I think it's better if I try something else here, and they're in control and we're implemented. And so we went from literally having right around 600 assets with only about a 4% coverage PM wise to we're up to 15% now. Now, not every asset requires a PM. Some things we run to failure, obviously, but as far as monthlies and quarterlies and everything, it was instantaneous the amount of time it took us to implement a PM program and start to see the actual effects.
Sure.
It's not where we do a PM program or we do a PM and then it still breaks down. We're actually beginning to catch the defects before they happen. And
Sure.
that's the whole purpose of a PM system, in my eyes, is that we catch a problem before it happens. Whether it's an inspection, which is just a visual, which is what I use on a monthly basis. That way I don't interrupt the operations. And then quarterly, everyone knows that, hey, quarterly is when we start getting in there and we work package this stuff together. One of the things I like too is we could link work orders together. So if somebody had a work order they had, we got another work request in, or we found something during the PM checks or the inspections, we began linking this chain together, creating a straight line effect, which basically creates a work package for my technicians when they do their quarterlies. Now I only have to bring the equipment down once a quarter, unless it's a breakdown. I only have to bring it down to where I interrupt into operations. Then I only have to do it once a quarter. And that's a huge deal because
Sure.
reality is any downtime, whether planned or otherwise, is bad for manufacturing. We lose money one way or another. So the ability to plan and schedule and have all this linked together, and not to mention the fact that there's a calendar in Upkeep, is huge because I can take that calendar and sit right next to the production planner and go, what's your schedule? Here's mine, and drag and drop my schedule around to match theirs. And again, we're no longer intrusive. We are truly doing what we need to do, which is keeping the machines running when they're needed, making parts. That was huge to me. That was a huge sales point.
Yeah, I mean the going back to the AI generation checklist. So that is the whole purpose of that is to get you off the ground,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've written soup to nuts thousands of preventive maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy doing it, right? And I'm the
Right.
guy who will go out there and I will crawl over the machine and inspect it and look for wear items for
Mm-hmm.
different types of things, right? But there's not a lot of people. There's some people who can't do that. They don't have the opportunity to do that, so they need something. And we always recommend that when you use an AI generator, you have to use it as just a starting point, and then you have to reference the reality of performing the maintenance to then modify that point, right? Um, but it does give a large portion of our customers the opportunity to start somewhere. Building out a accurate PM task list, checklist, plan, whatever is a very difficult thing to do, and it still has to be modified over time. Because context is key when it comes to developing your PM program based on age, how it's operated, its environment, all of those things. So I'm glad you like that. A lot of people like that. Um, and I didn't have it when I was an Upkeep customer. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I
I
wrote
think it's
everything
great
by
too for
hand.
the new folks. We've got a lot of young folks, or we've got folks that are starting out that are new to the system. As a matter of fact, my most senior technician has 3 years experience on site. Everyone else is, I think we've got a 2 year and 1 year and a 6 month. So that's the technician knowledge base that we have. So for the ability to utilize something like that and get them in there, what it does, most importantly in my eyes, is it puts eyes and hands on equipment so that they can learn the equipment and they start figuring out where the wear points are, where the pain points are for production. It just works fantastic. It got them out there, and now they're learning the equipment faster because now they actually have something to touch. You know, if you have a blank piece of paper and you're told to inspect a piece of equipment, you're going to spend 90% of your time trying to figure out what you need to look at. Here, at least they're in there. And now you're figuring it out. And so it actually, over time, it decreases my learning curve for my new technicians
Sure.
because it puts them in the field on the equipment where they belong.
Sure, sure. What types of machines are you guys working on a day-to-day basis?
So we use a lot of presses, brake presses. We do a lot of welding. We have water jets. We have laser cutters. The bulk of my issues come from cranes and tow motors. But as far as equipment is concerned, heavy industrial presses, we're talking 28, I think we've got a 2,800 ton, we've got a 3,000 ton, we've got heavy duty. And then our boring mills and our vertical lathes are some of the largest you'd ever seen. They're 2 stories high.
I love that. You got,
Yeah,
if you're allowed, you have to send me some pictures.
absolutely.
Yeah, the vertical boring mills are just wild.
Hmm.
And you have overhead gantry cranes.
Absolutely. Yep. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
tons of them.
yeah, yeah. What's the max tons on your overhead cranes?
We use 40s, 40 tons.
40-ton cranes, nice.
Yep.
And you don't have to get into specifics. What's the thickest piece of plate that you can bend?
Um, we're up to 4 and 6 inch.
Jesus Christ. Do you have any roll forms? Do you roll as well?
No, yes. So we bend, roll. We not full roll, but we have to do it in parts, bits and pieces. So halves, quarters,
Yeah.
and then that's where the welding comes in, and we start to place those together. And we're talking large, large, large. They're big pieces. It's some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen.
Yeah, I was in charge of setting up the maintenance program for Avondale Shipyard in New Orleans. I set up that program, hired the maintenance manager. He's still there. He's great. But that was the Avondale shipyard that was being converted into an intermodal port.
Hmm.
And I had the opportunity to be a part of inspecting and looking at all the machines that they had for shipbuilding because they built ships there.
Right.
And the machine shop was amazing. Like lathes that have a 96-inch head with
Hmm.
100 feet of bed length, roll forms that could roll 6-inch piece of plate,
Right.
steam presses. I mean, just the most awesome stuff.
We just
Uh,
implemented a lathe that is 40 feet long.
the bed length.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's all the stuff I like. And you guys are maintaining those things, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. How often do you get into of installation and commissioning, or are you guys having the manufacturers that you purchase from do that?
We normally, because of the size of my team, we utilize outside sources or vendors to deal a lot with that. We have a couple that we utilize primarily, but we get involved, and I expect my crews to take a look at what's going on as they build it up because that's the behind the scenes look. That's a lot of the stuff they don't normally see.
Sure.
So it's kind of fascinating for them to see it get installed and see exactly how it's put together from the ground up. It gives them that inside perspective, so they can create a better PM program with it. And that's usually what we do. As we work through these installs, we kind of start developing the PM program in our mind because a lot of the OEM recommendations now, their whole concept is for it to last a warranty time frame, and then their business isn't just in the selling of the equipment, but the parts and the critical spares afterwards. So being able to create a program from the get-go and watch what the heavy wear is from new to over time is a huge perspective and an eye opener for these guys. And I think they like digging into that, seeing what makes it tick, so to speak.
Sure. I very rarely follow manufacturer's guidelines when writing services for equipment. Um, it is it's generally way overdone to where you're buying
Mhm.
spare parts and consumables, or it's the bare minimum and you're just constantly things are wearing out and breaking.
Right.
Um, and a lot of times, not every type of machine and business, but a lot of times no type of failure modes and effects analysis is going into the design of that machine during the design. So they're basically just saying like, oh, this is a slide bar, so it wears,
Hmm.
or the wrong material. Like I've found many types of machinery where the wrong material of a component is used,
Hmm.
and just changing that material or that type of synchronous belt or whatever increases the lifespan of that machine almost indefinitely sometimes, right? Um, but I wanted to ask you, are you utilizing spare parts management and upkeep?
So we are, and that's one of the other areas that it really kind of caught me that it got my attention is so prior to based on the EOP system, a lot of times you'll know that maintenance, the module inside of it is kind of a secondhand thought. And what happens is they'll use the material side or the MRO side as a material for the manufacturing portion, which means that there's no true inventory that we're tracking. So when I came on board, one of the first things I want to start doing is seeing, well, what spares do we have? It looks like how to say like a hoarder's closet many times. I may need this later, I may need this later, but in fact, that equipment's been gone 10 years and we just don't need it. So that was one of the first things we had to do. But what got my attention quickly was it went away from the list factor and almost went to an Amazon shopping view, which immediately caught the attention of my guys in the department. So now they can find it, and there's pictures. So now it alleviates any doubt. They have the ability to see what they're looking for, and it even works on the tablet so they can see what the picture is. They know where they're heading. They know what they need. So yes, we are building out that program inside there, and it's fantastic.
Great. Are you
Um,
are you are you using or going to be using barcoding so that you can eliminate
yes,
any
already put it
variability
in
there?
play.
Yeah,
Already put
good.
it in play. Yep.
You can barcode your machines too.
Yep, we're doing that too. So
Yeah.
one of the things we're implementing with our tow motors, as I mentioned earlier, is that we have a daily requirement or a checklist. And before we were doing it through, I believe it was Smart Sheets. Now we've taken the Q code, the QR code, and I've printed them all out and placed them on the individual tow motors. So now they have the ability to scan it with their device, go through the checklist, see where the work order is, because it automatically populates. I utilize the automation, so it generates every day for us. They can check it, sign off on it, and then I report out on it. So it's proof that we're doing this, which was a huge factor. So we went through two major audits recently. One happened to be a few weeks ago with Oshkosh Defense, and I noticed that you'd been dealing with them lately. So we went through an audit with them,
They're a
and
customer
they
of
were,
ours. Yep.
yep, they were big on the upkeep when I was doing that because nine times out of 10, when I get to talk and obviously my hands start moving, and I feel more like an evangelist for CMMS systems than I do anything else. So I got to talking to that, but then our most recent one was with NNS or Norfolk Naval Shipyard. And what was supposed to be a 30-minute appointment turned into about a 45-minute or an hour presentation on the power of upkeep and the power of a CMMS system and what it truly does to keep their assets, because they are involved with our assets,
Sure.
up and running. And so that, some of the things I showed them was how we were able to track, the report out structures, how everybody's informed because it's a 360-degree loop at all times. When a request is put in, we get the notification. As soon as I update it and make it into a work order, they get a notification. So we close that loop in communication, which used to be with the number one concern or complaint that I heard from the operations department was that we never really know when maintenance is done or what they're doing or what's happening, and I understand it because the maintenance folks will go in there and we'll fix what we have to fix, and then we're on to the next problem. It's like being in the rodeo. We're on to the next one. We got to keep moving. And so there's a communication gap that tends to happen. With this, as soon as they hit complete and they're done, the notification goes out and everybody's aware that that equipment's back online. And that's a huge pain point that operations had with maintenance that we've just nipped in the bud.
Yeah. You can solve a lot of problems with the relationships between operation and maintenance just by communicating.
Absolutely.
Uh,
It's
I've
incredibly important.
yeah, I've spent lots and lots and lots of time building relationships with my interdepartments or the
Mm-hmm.
departments within my business. Because at the end of the day, you know, all of the departments in the business have a vested interest in each other, whether they realize it or not, right? Operating machines is going to dictate its lifespan second to design,
Hmm.
not how much you maintain it. Maintaining machines is arbitrary
Hmm.
based on their operation. And people don't see that. They don't
Right.
understand those things, right? And you'll never, ever, ever increase reliability by maintaining things. It doesn't work that way. All you do is maintain the design
Design
reliability of that asset.
reliability.
And you know, a CMMS is a window into how your maintenance organization is functioning. And I think I've said this before on this podcast, but some people um, they don't like to get too crazy with a CMMS because it starts to poke holes in the reality of how they're managing their business. It starts to uncover things that other people now have the opportunity to see and start asking questions about. And in to me, that's opportunity.
Mhm. That's
All
a
of those things are
proven
opportunity.
opportunity. Yeah.
Nothing was a secret in my maintenance organizations.
Mhm.
And another thing in my maintenance organizations pertaining to upkeep is I was never pointing my finger outside of my department until I had pointed it at myself 100 times,
Right.
right? And upkeep allowed me to evaluate the work being performed, whether corrective, reactive, preventive, or whatever, and to start to understand really where problems are lying, particularly in manpower waste, right? How long is it actually taking to do things? How is the operation actually affected by us performing planned or unplanned maintenance? So I would always get technicians and supervisors and maintenance managers that would come to me and they'd be like, you got to talk to this guy, the operation, this. And I go, whoa, 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 whoa. Have we done all the right things that we are supposed to do internally? And before that, I would never say anything to anybody until I confirmed those things first. One, even as simple as like, did the planner or the scheduler make it to the operations meeting this week? No. Well, then why are you bitching at me? You're
Have we
out.
done what we need to do?
You're
Yep.
misaligned, right? Um,
Hmm.
and upkeep is a conduit to understanding a lot of those intricacies. If you integrate it correctly with your business, you utilize it and ensure its adoption, and then you continually optimize and improve it as you use it because then you're able to leverage it in real time, as you said from the very beginning, right? In real time, we're leveraging this data. And we're also using it to build out good decision making for the future of our assets. You're using old machines. I love old machines. I love keeping old machines running. They're great. But at some point, the efficiency of that machine or its replacement asset value and the maintenance you're performing on it doesn't make sense anymore. So you got to have some weird person like me come and be like, "Hey, sell me your old 1920s press and go buy
I'll
a new
take it.
one."
And
Right?
that's kind of the key factors too. You hit on some key points too. Over my time working in the maintenance field, I found that there's four things that always seem to cause the disconnection with maintenance and operations. And it's always starts out on the maintenance side. And one that's it's the analytics side, but it's the basics of it. A lot of times CMMS systems become really, to quote Larry the Cable Guy, it becomes an $1,800 deck of cards, is all it is, because it's not implemented correctly. And then when they do go to implement it, I remember when I first rolled over and we were doing the implementation for the Oracle EAM at the steel mill, and I was brought on as the CMMS administrator, and I was handed a piece of paper and said, well, here's your asset list. And it was 10 line items. Now, this thing is 400 yards long with equipment everywhere. And the 10 items they gave me were the 10 processes used to go from the block of steel ingot down to the coiled roll. That was it. So weeks later, a few months later, actually, I'm up to 2,400 pieces of equipment I'm tracking from this 10 item process list. And so that's one of the things I've noticed is that one, we don't get our assets in there. So how do you stand, from a business standpoint, you start talking to those leadership folks and say, well, this asset's past its life cycle. It's well past it. Or it's costing me more to maintain it when I don't have it there. I can't track that data.
Yeah.
Then the other aspect is, once we've got the assets set up, are we using the CMMS system to its fullest capabilities? 9 times, no, it just becomes a file folder. We enter a quick work order, put something in it. There's no details, there's no information. We don't have time tracking. We're not utilizing it properly. Then we go to defects. We can't track that without assets. So it's a linear effect, cause and effect all the way down the line. That if we don't start with the basics by a proper, solid implementation of a CMMS system, then you can't really sell it. And that's where you have to become the evangelist to start talking to folks and letting them know, hey, this system will do everything you want. I listen to my leadership team and they want to know what's the cost of maintenance? What's it costing me to maintain this one piece of equipment? Or why is it I can't get this product out the door? What's the reliability of this equipment? So that's how I used to sell, UpKeep when I started pushing this through. First, I started with the VP of finance because you always go to the money first. And then I pushed it out towards the operations department. And the whole time bringing my maintenance team along with me, and I think one of the greatest things that happens is the ability to test the CMMS system before. It's like a test drive before you drive it. Does it do what you need to do? Does it match your business requirements? And that's how we should treat maintenance. It's a business inside a business. We
Yeah,
need to maintain that
I always say your maintenance business.
yeah, your maintenance, we're not just a cost center, we're a business. All you see is the business unit leaders or the business units, and maintenance never seems to be part of that. And you have to create that environment of folks understanding that maintenance is a business. We're one of the business units.
The reason that this conversation happens everywhere is you have to think about the lens in which maintenance is viewed from.
Right.
And no one takes that into consideration when they start to go on these journeys.
Mhm.
Maintenance is viewed by the bigger business and different and other departments differently. You have to connect with those other business units or departments and understand the lens in which they view you and your department from. And that's why I say relationship building and trust building is so important. And I'm going to say to your second point about this lens, as you say, you you're trying to show the value of all these things. Well, if it were me, and this is my argument to you, is through the relationships I build in step one by understanding the optics of my business and connecting the optics of that business to my goal for the organization and the maintenance team, I'm going to let other people go and speak on my behalf because now I've connected them to what I'm doing through their lens. And now we have an understanding. And now
Mhm.
we're building a relationship. And eventually we're going to build trust because I'm going to say something for what they need, and then I'm going to act on it. It's going to be remedied, and then people are going to start talking about how there was a success, right?
Right.
And then when I go to make a case for something or to further expand, I have other people who are going to say things for me as well. So it's not me essentially going like, we need this thing, blah, 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 right? It's me going, we need this thing. And here's how it's important to not only maintenance, but to safety, to operations, to quality, to facilities, to finance, to procurement. And if you need to talk to them, go ahead because now they understand, because now we all are looking through the same lens at what maintenance is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I agree. I think that, I still think that there has to be the evangelist that helps sell it and creates that conversation.
Sure.
You have to create that buzz around it. When they're used to using a type of system or it's just kind of what I call a static, lethargic system, they don't see the value of it. And again, it's through their lens. I understand that. But there comes a point in time where you have to make just enough noise for them to actually take notice that there's a change.
Sure, sure. That's what I mean by going to
Yeah.
all the individual. You have to, yes, you have to be the kickoff, right?
Yeah, we have
But
to we have to let folks know that this is a
yeah,
change. Look at how this benefits you. Let me show you. Instead of me telling you, here's the noise. Look at me. Now let's look at this. And I'm not saying me, but look at the department, what we can do for you now, how we can better serve you as a
sure.
maintenance department, and how you can better maintain your equipment. And then also gets folks involved too. And to address your point, one of the things I like about it is with the data inside the CMMS system now, we can actually show, we could eliminate this issue right here if we utilize TPM, if we utilize autonomous maintenance. We could actually reduce the downtime by just creating an operator checklist. And then that takes us out of the equation and frees up again 4 people on the team. It frees up our folks to continue on to other aspects of maintenance. So the ability to have that data and to make that decision making process cleaner is a huge sales point for it. And it's one of the biggest things I push is look what it does for you. There's no longer just a list, what we call the blue screen of death as far as that old ERP system is concerned. It's a dynamic view that they can see, that they can feel and touch, that
Yeah.
they can actually understand that this is happening. Look at what it's doing for us. And then when they start seeing the charts, because I've already created tons of them, of the analytics, pushing that out to them, giving them that information, and allowing them to increase their decision making. That is one of the biggest things. So when I do say about evangelism, you start the cause, then they push the message.
Yeah, that's right. And you can tell them also, hey, when you're flying on vacation, you can pull up your phone and look at everything I'm doing right there on the spot, right?
Yep. 24/7. You're connected.
24/7. You don't have to bother, you don't have to reach out, you don't have to do anything. You can passively evaluate what's happening in your department.
And monitor. Yep.
Yeah. I think we've talked a lot. I was going to ask you why upkeep, but I think you've already explained that to me. Um, so I want to give you the last word, Chris. How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to talk maintenance, CMMS, steel mills, heavy industry? How can they get in touch with you?
So I've got multiple ways you can contact me. The best way probably is to get a hold of me either through LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn, or through my business, which is Tasklytics. It's a maintenance reliability solutions company here in Cleveland, Ohio, where I go out and assist folks trying to, optimize their maintenance. And what I focus on is those 4 key elements I was talking about earlier, and trying to remove the confusion and the noise as they work their way towards reliability centered maintenance. And that is www.tasklytics, that's Lytix.com.
Cool. Awesome. Chris, it has been a pleasure. It's always good to speak to other veterans, particularly ones who have ran the aircraft carrier and know what that's like. And just for everybody, Chris and I were talking before we started filming. Chris's carrier, the Kitty Hawk, I was at USS George Washington, and when I went on my first deployment, the USS George Washington had just relieved the Kitty Hawk in Yokosuka, Japan. So his carrier was literally the carrier that was on watch in Japan right before mine showed up. So always awesome to have those connections. Chris, I want to thank you again, and I want to thank you on behalf of Upkeep for coming on, for being a customer, for being an evangelist, for understanding the fundamentals, and personally for me, from being in heavy industry and doing the work, because that is the most valuable thing to me. But we thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you, Bryan. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. See you, Chris.